Have you ever wondered what the 6 different avenues of adoption are? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in the next 6 step series. So I'm going to talk about each one over the next 6 weeks and break them down. And so just to kind of give you a brief overview, there are domestic agency, there are consultants, there's private adoption, embryo, foster care, and international. So over the next 6 weeks, we're going to break that down into a 6-part series. So my name is Stephanie. This is all about adoption, and we're going to dive into the first avenue, which is agency adoptions. So with a domestic agency adoption, typically, I'm going to give you broad generalization because each agency has their own policies and procedures. And so we're just going to talk in general terms. So with age range, it could be anywhere from 21 years old up to 50 years old, or 25 years old to 57 years old. So each agency has their own requirement on what age of a family needs to be in order to work with them. Another thing that's different is marriage. The length of marriage that you have to have been married, if you need to be married at all. So some agencies have no policies with regards to length of marriage. Some have as little as 1 year, and some have 3 years and 5 years. So that does vary from agency to agency, how long you need to have been married, if married. And also along the lines with marriage, whether an agency will work with single parents or whether they will only work with married couples. The home study. Some agencies have the requirement that you have to have completed the home study through their agency, although I'll tell you that's pretty rare. Most agencies will accept outside home studies, especially national agencies who work with families all over the United States. Residence. So some agencies will require that you live within the state in order to be able to do the adoption process with them, the states that they're licensed in. And some agencies will work with you regardless of what state you live in, especially what are called national agencies, ones that are licensed and network and advertised throughout the United States. All agencies are going to look for financial stability. All agencies are going to look for healthy families and to be able to get a physician form showing that you have a normal life expectancy. There are some agencies who will work with families who have cancer or have had cancer in the past. They're known as cancer-friendly agencies. And so when it comes to medical conditions, it'll be important to talk with them, especially if you have anything that might be unique to you, such as a rare genetic disorder or previous cancer, and also mental health. Mental health falls under medical as well. Prior criminal history. This does vary from agency to agency. Most agencies won't work with a family if they have a felony that is violent in nature. Now, there's some felonies that are, considered, I guess you could say, minor, like, for example, writing a bad check. I know families in the past who have closed a checking account, opened another checking account, and forgot that they had checks that still hadn't cleared the bank, and that is a felony. And so each felony is kind of looked at from agency to agency. Some agencies just have a blanket across no felonies at all. So it'll be important if you have any history, and believe me, it has not been expunged. You've been told it's expunged, you have gone through the expulsion process, and that may be true if you're applying for a job, but when it comes to adoption, we know it all. We see it all, even when you were a minor. So don't hide anything. That's just so important when it comes to criminal background, that you don't hide anything because you think it's been expunged. I promise you, it's still there on your record somewhere, and especially on the federal side. So be sure you're very honest with your agency, and I would be upfront from the very beginning to make sure this won't be an issue before you start investing time and money. Something I forgot to talk about earlier when it was with regards to marriage is also divorces. Some agencies have a requirement on that you can't have had more than 1 or 2 divorces. So be sure you look at their policies if you've had multiple divorces in your past. Age of the children, typically with agency adoptions, they're going to be newborn because most agencies work with expecting moms who are pregnant and considering placing their child for adoption. Now, whether you can choose the gender and the race of your child, that varies vastly between agency to agency. Some agencies will not let you choose gender or race, and some agencies will let you choose gender and also, but not race, and vice versa. They won't let you choose race, but they won't let you choose gender, but they will let you choose race. So it goes back and forth. So be sure you get to know those policies, particularly if you have a race or gender preference. Open adoptions. Most agencies practice open adoptions. It's pretty rare that you're going to find an agency that practices enclosed adoptions. The person who really dictates open or closed adoption is going to be the birth family, whether they choose to end up staying in contact afterwards or not. So some agencies will allow families to do closed adoptions, some agencies won't. So if this is something that's important to you, be sure you get to know the agency and their policies on open adoptions. Travel, that will depend on whether you have an expecting mom who is in your state or whether she's in another state, on whether you'll have travel or not. The process time and the number of children an agency places for adoption, this is vastly different between each agency. Some agencies will do placements within a year. Some agencies, I've heard upwards of 5 years, which you shouldn't have to wait 5 years to be able to adopt. So kind of find out how long their adoption process typically takes. And that really is determined on how many families they have on their waiting list and how many placements they do a year. So get to know those numbers before you spend time and money with an agency. Cost. This is another thing that varies vastly from agency to agency. So you can have anything from $20,000 on upwards to, I've heard one agency says it could be $60,000, $70,000. So just get to know the agency and what their fees are and what's all included in those fees. Generally, you'll notice a correlation between higher cost and quicker placement. And that's a direct correlation between the amount of advertising they do. And advertising dollars are expensive, and therefore those advertising dollars get passed on to families, which then could make their adoption more expensive. However, they're much more likely to adopt more quickly when more money is spent on advertising by the agency. So just kind of know what the figures are and kind of what that means overall. So that's kind of a general overall view of what agency adoptions look like. And something I forgot to say at the beginning is an agency adoption is when an expecting mom's pregnant, comes to an agency looking at placing her child for adoption. She'll choose an expecting family that is on that agency's waiting list to look at making an adoption plan. So that's what an agency adoption looks like. So I hope you found that helpful. Next week, we're going to talk about consultants and what consultants look like from the adoption process. So look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks. Bye.